Good afternoon. It's Wednesday, the 3rd of June 2015, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host this afternoon, Brian Gerrish. With me in the studio behind the technical desk is Nick Green, and we're going to be joined by video Skype link by John Hurst from the British Constitution Group. Weather today, pretty good here in Plymouth, sunny, and reports from across the country are pretty good, although it's a bit cloudy in Rhondda apparently. So there we are. Well, UK Column is extremely sad to announce today the death of John Harris. John Harris was an outstanding campaigner looking at fraud and corruption in Britain's courts, what was happening with common law. He was also looking into the betrayal of Britain by the British monarchy, and he was an inspiration to literally hundreds of thousands of people across the world. Well, the news that we don't have a lot of details, simply to be able to say that John has died, and we thought we would just have a look at a few slides today to show you a little bit about his work. Now, this, of course, was one of the first photographs that UK Column published of John Harris. And this is after he'd taken an affidavit and delivered it to the Queen in Buckingham Palace to say that essentially he was withdrawing consent because either the Queen had been betrayed herself or she was betraying the country. And this was our original headline, Carpenter petitions Queen. And we called at that stage for Brown's corrupt government to be dismissed. We will see whether we can make this edition available. This was originally printed in June 2008, and there's John outside the gates of Buckingham Palace. But John worked extremely hard to wake people up to what was really happening in UK. And of course, he gave many talks, including with the British Constitution Group. And, well, this one showing him very pensive on stage. But really, it was John's deep research which took the language off fraud and corruption in Britain's courts. And it was the public talks that started to spread real understanding of the legalese being used. And, of course, John was particularly pushing a message of stand up and be counted. So brilliant work, and in no time at all he was known not only throughout Britain but throughout many parts of the world. Another picture here of him on stage, and what have we said here? Well, he talked of course about the Queen's betrayal of the British nation through mediatisation. He also talked in depth about legalese. And John really saw with a remarkable clarity through the veneer of respectability that surrounds British establishment and politics. And he took a deep look into the criminal heart of what was really going on in the country. How do we remember him? Well, I certainly remember John Harris as this remarkable North London boy, as I like to call him. And he would be stood on stage laughing and joking, but lecturing professional people on intimate detail of the law, including definitions from Black's Law Dictionary. And the thing that was really quite remarkable was that he made his talks fun. So we are certainly going to miss John Harris, and we'd like to say on air that our thoughts go out to John's family. At the moment, deeply upsetting time. So we hope all of you who've enjoyed John's work and have learnt from it will join us in saying we're very sorry at his passing. Perhaps that's a good time for me to hand over to John Hurst. John, you will remember John Harris joining us at the very earliest British Constitution Group conferences. And of course, he had extraordinary knowledge about the law. What are your thoughts?
Well, he went a long way to waking me up as well, and Tina, my missus. A great loss. I don't know what the funeral arrangements are, whether they want people to come, but I certainly be keen to go to express my sympathy. we're fortunate we live in the age of the internet, because his work's being recorded and it can be used again to wake others up. So all's not lost. His legacy will carry on.
Well, of course, you're spot on with that one, and we will be playing out after this news programme a short clip, which we've taken from YouTube, but it's a little series of excerpts of John Harris being interviewed. So we'll let John speak for himself, and as you say, the advantage of both video and the internet is that John's remarkable work is certainly not lost. Well, if John was yet another person who was pointing out the sheer depravity and corruption of Britain's legal system, I think it's a wonderful opportunity to lift our spirits a bit. And let's have a look at this lady here, Bethan Jenkins. Now, Bethan Jenkins has just given the UK column an exclusive interview on the Neathport Talbot child stealing case. This is around mum Linda Lewis. And if you tune into the UK column news on Friday, the 5th of June, so that's this week, you will be able to hear that interview. And I will just say, what an extraordinary lady, brave enough not only to step forward and speak out publicly about the Linda Lewis case, but she was also very measured, it was human, the interview. For the first time, we've come across a politician that indeed seems deeply concerned about what's happening to her people, the people around her in the local communities. And we're going to say, please tune in to hear that interview on Friday. Well, meanwhile, what are the rest of the politicians up to? Well, we'd like to thank one of our viewers for bringing up this little subject. It's part of Conservative Policy Forum. This is where the Conservatives are congratulating themselves on what they've achieved in the world. Let's have a look at this. Paper 6 of 13, Britain's Place in the World. Our government's vision of foreign affairs is a distinctive British foreign policy that is active in Europe and across the world, that builds up British engagement in the parts of the globe where opportunities as well as threats increasingly lie, that is at ease within a networked world and harnesses the full potential of our cultural links, and that promotes our national interest while recognising that this cannot be narrowly or selfishly defined. And who's written these wonderful words? Well, none other than Foreign Secretary William Hague. That was back in July 2010. And of course, what has Mr. Hague achieved with the help of David Cameron? Well, yet more wars, bloodshed and destruction overseas. But we couldn't really get the message across as well as this lady who tweeted out, "Wake up." And what she's illustrated is Tony Blair, who's resigned as the Middle East peace envoy. And apparently Mr. Blair said, "My work here is done." So on this very, very powerful Twitter, we've got a picture of the utter destruction. This could be Iraq, it could be Syria, it could be Libya. But anywhere the British foreign policy has gone, be it Labour, Lib Dem or Conservative, of course the destruction and bloodshed has followed. So Friday, if you tune in for the first time with Plaid Cymru Party, we're going to be talking real politics about real issues from a change of heart in the political system. Well, can we trust our government? This article says not. It's from The Intercept, and it says that Apple and Google have been attending a confidential spy summit in a remote English mansion. And what makes this interesting is that security services have been meeting with Google, Apple, and telecommunication giants, all behind closed doors, of course. So there were members from the CIA there, from GCHQ, but as well as they described, top spooks from Australia, Canada, France, Germany, Sweden, academics, and a handful of journalists, to which we say, well, don't worry your little heads, because these are the people looking after our interests. behind closed doors? Well, are they? John, I'm not sure whether you've been aware this one's taken place. We only discovered a couple of days ago, but it seems ever more blatant that the public are simply last to know as policies compiled behind closed doors.
I didn't know about it. Apple and Google are just outgrowths of the NSA, aren't they? They're the seed money to form those companies, but in fact came from them. So it's spy versus spy, which is the norm these days.
And we have Theresa May, of course, suggesting that their powers are not great enough. We need more powers for the state to spy on people. And of course, her favourite term, and the term of David Cameron, is non-violent activists. You're certainly a very active person talking about the Constitution and common law. You're certainly non-violent. Do you regard yourself as a danger to the British establishment?
Well, I hope I am. Otherwise, I'm not doing it right, am I? A proportion of the population have always been awkward. One of my heroes is John Lilburn, who's a malcontent, shall we say, from the English Civil War period. I had occasion to visit Oxford Jail once when they were having an open day, and there was an occurrence book for the period, and John Lilburn is a prisoner. And the occurrence book said John Lilburn had to be moved to the deepest dungeon because he was upsetting the warders by shouting comments out of the wicket, the gate in the cell. So hopefully I won't get to that stage, but there's always a proportion of the population that like that.
Well, John, thank you for that. I take your point that if we're not upsetting the establishment and the government, we're not doing our job. I think we are doing our job, and I think they are getting upset. So we'll continue. But tell the audience, our audience today, what you've been up to, because I know you've been travelling a lot. You've been attending court, and I think you've got some quite exciting news about what's been happening around the country.
Well, the council tax is a thing of mine because I'm not a businessman. I can't withhold VAT. I can't withhold my income tax because it's taxed at source. But I can do something about council tax because they expect me to sign a cheque. For those who've seen my video on Starve the Beast on the British Constitution Group website, that was made about 2 months ago, and things have moved on from there. I subsequently posted an article called "The Section 151 Officer, Council Tax and Fraud," and yesterday I completed a document hot off the press, which I hope Brian will put on the BCG website. And it's the result of my researches. And the bottom line is that Peter Kroll drew my attention to the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report and the accounting standards which councils apply. And these accounting standards are set by regulations published by government. What they do is they allow the hiding of money in overseas accounts. You recall the Iceland banking collapse scandal when loads of local authorities had to admit that they'd done this. Well, they didn't just do it in Iceland, they did it in other places. And there's a school of thought based on some research that's referred to in my first article that the governments worldwide, Western governments have got away with this for many years, and there's so much money being salted away that the income is sufficient to mean that we shouldn't be paying tax. It should be local authorities should be self-sustaining on the money they pinched previously, and that would also apply to local authorities. Now it's easier to work out what's gone in a local authority because they're required by Act of Parliament to publish their accounts. There's a thing called the Statement of Accounts, which is the true situation, and then there's a budget which is revealed to the public. And in this age of austerity, the budget is always short. There have to be cuts, has to be austerity, and the public are never told that in actual fact the local authority could well have some money stashed away. So in Paris, for example, where I live, there were £302 million in reserves. The shortfall is only 20 million. So why the hell won't they transfer money from the reserves to replace the shortfall? It's very hard to understand. In actual fact, when you read the article, you'll see, particularly the Part 2 version, you'll see that they rely on regulations. They say there are regulations that say we've got to have this amount in reserves. And what they forget is that they have statutory obligations. Regulation is a lesser form of law. A regulation is a statutory instrument authorised by an Act of Parliament, and a regulation can't repeal an Act of Parliament. So let's say, for example, you're a local authority and you're required to provide nursery provision, and you don't because of the cuts, and you have to make cuts because you've got money stashed away by regulation, well, then that's fraud, because you're not complying with your statutory obligation to provide nurseries. Now, a council came unstuck with that, not far from me, Rhondda, and the article gives an account. And the way it was done, councillors were given an incomplete picture of the true situation relating to finances by officials. So having false information, the councillors agreed to the cuts when they shouldn't have done. Two ladies took them to the Court of Queen's Bench sitting at Swansea. Ladies who had children who should have had nursery education, and they won basically. And the article gives an account. Now, if councils are doing this, they've got two prices to pay, I would submit. The first one is political, and the second one is legal. The political one is if you discover that your councillors are incompetent, or they're deliberately hiding money, and there's no need for you to have cuts in your county, and really there's no need for you to have council tax. Paris, for example, the taken money each year for council tax is 60 million, and the council's got 300 million stashed away, so they've got 5 years in reserve. So do we need council tax at all? Very hard to justify.
John, just to clarify that, the council is taking 60 million and they have 300 million stashed away?
Yes.
Yeah. It's very interesting, the subject, because a couple of years ago, the UK column was sent some information by a gentleman in the Midlands that was talking about this very same subject, that he had discovered that councils had. He was talking across the country billions of pounds secreted away from the public eyes. And he was also talking about this. I'm going to try really hard to see whether we can dig that paperwork out. But very interesting. You're seeing it. We've heard this from other sources. What we're looking at, of course, is duplicitous accounting. The public is being deceived over public money. And what is quite clear is that the accounting officers know what's actually happening. I know you've talked about this subject before, but just remind me about the officers who get the special training from the government.
Well, I refer you to my first article about Section 151. What Section 151 officer refers to, there's an Act of Parliament from 1972, the Local Government Act from 1972, and Section 151 says council must have an official who's got overall responsibility for finances. Yep. And then it also says that official must have certain qualifications. There's a body called...
sorry, John, just see whether we can bring you back on screen. That's it. Excellent.
So there's a body called the Institute of Accountancy, and they run courses for various people who are after different jobs. And one of them is a qualification for the Section 151 officer. And the Section 151 officer is a highly paid council official. I understand they're around the £100,000 mark. They're specially protected in terms of being dismissed. They're very hard to get rid of, and they have the job of oversight. And I won't slander my Paris one because I don't know, but the Rhondda one certainly in the judgment in front of the Court of Queen's Bench has got a lot of questions to answer, because you've got overall authority for the way the funds are expended, and he must have known that the councillors weren't being told that they had this money in reserve. In Rhondda, it was 100 million they had in reserve, and the shortfall they're talking about was only something like 2 million. When you see my second article, you'll see the web of regulations that's been established. Normally, there's no question if regulation doesn't repeal an Act of Parliament, but they've sneaked in a Local Government Act 2003, and Section 21 changes the common law rule, and says when we say a regulation can alter an Act of Parliament. Very, very dubious legal reasoning, and that's what they've done. It's so complicated, not many people can understand it. But the weakness the present regime have is we can see them now, can't we? They're becoming incompetent. I mean, the story I tell is about the king who stuttered. The issue wasn't that he had a stutter. The issue was that he had an IQ of 70, which is borderline subnormal, and he couldn't be allowed out on his own. And over time, elites do tend to deteriorate, and that's what's happening. And they're losing their touch, and we can see them. And this will be an example.
Right, John, thank you. Well, isn't it interesting, of course, that shortage of money, cutbacks is the weapon that the government is using to drive through what is a communitarian plan of change, NHS, police, schools, but also defence. And we're going to be coming on to the subject of what's happening around defence in a few minutes. Before we do that, let's just remind ourselves of the key subject in this country, which of course is not money. It's the fact that we have a government, a British government, which is actively covering up the abuse of children, the serious sexual abuse of children. And to do that, they rely, of course, very much on the BBC. Oh, I'm sorry, we'll bring you in on this one. We've got the BBC here making out that there is a comprehensive programme of police investigations. Notice how the BBC label this historical child abuse. It's not something that's happening today. It was all happening many years ago. So that's the first fob off, the nudge by the BBC. But in a glowing report here, we're led to believe that the police are actually doing something. Whereas, of course, the reality is very different. We've shown this image before, but the National Police Chief Councils claim that the police are believing crime reports. But we had Robert Greene talking about serious sexual abuse of children. He simply is not believed. He ends up in prison to shut him up. We've got Melanie Shaw being appallingly treated in the Conservatives' profit-making Sodexo prison in Peterborough. From recent correspondence, we understand that she's back on a punishment routine, which is likely to include solitary confinement. What is this lady's crime? Well, she's a survivor of abuse, but she was brave enough to talk about her abuse and other children in Beechwood Children's Home, Nottingham. We have the Asian gentleman from Oxford who made over 80 reports warning that white youngsters were being abused at Oxford and Cherwell Valley College, simply ignored and then harassed and bullied by Thames Valley Police. Holly Gregg herself made the accusation she did, never investigated, and as a result, Grampian now Police Scotland simply claimed there was no crime. Ben Fellows, yet another one, claimed he was sexually abused by a senior politician, and where is he? In prison. And we've got Ella Draper, the Hampstead mother, whose children made the extraordinary allegations they did, not investigated by the police, who then say nothing to worry about. So remarkable then, or not, that the BBC is now busy acting as spokesperson for the Metropolitan Police. Rape investigations form an overwhelming burden on the Met Police. And the big boss, Sir Bernard Hogan-Howe, says here that the report shines an honest light on how the system needs to change. Well, UK Column challenges that because we believe that before the system changes, the corrupt criminal officers who have consistently failed sexual abuse victims and who've lied and covered up abuse need to be brought to court and tried themselves. But who would carry out a report with such honesty into sexual abuse? Well, it's none other than this lady, Eilish Angelini, former Procurator Fiscal of Scotland, and of course the lady who was implicated in matters around Holly Gregg abuse case, and was eventually challenged by Robert Greene as to whether she'd used public funds to pursue him through the courts. Well, she's now south of the border and advising the Met Police on matters to do with sexual abuse. Bernard Hogan-Howe says that police will treat rape and sexual offences as seriously as terrorist threats to Britain. Well, that's a very interesting statement. Well, the report was conducted by Dame Eilish Angelini, as it says, formerly Scotland's top prosecutor, and she was commissioned not only by the Metropolitan Police, But the Crown Prosecution Service, the same Crown Prosecution Service, of course, who is dealing with the abuse around Nottingham children's homes by imprisoning abuse survivor Melanie Shaw. We don't have to make this up. It's in the national press. So let's remind ourselves that it was Robert Greene who ended up in prison twice, not for abusing youngsters, but for trying to protect them and expose the truth. And, well, Eilish Angelini ordered the charges against Robert Greene imprisoned for 2 spells. This one here talking about 3 months, no juries. Apparently Operation U-Tree's taken up the case. We don't think so. And he's been silenced now by a worldwide gagging order preventing him mentioning Holly Gregg anywhere in the world. We wrote about this subject. We don't apologise for this headline, but what this effectively means is that under the combination of the legal system through SNP, Police Scotland, and the Procurator Fiscal's office, paedophiles in Scotland, if they are in the establishment, are simply protected. John, would you like to give us a comment? You know, obviously, the Holly Gregg case extremely well yourself.
Well, indeed. This confirms that the way it's done, the way material is concealed, is by putting a safe pair of hands, as they would describe it, in high positions, and that somehow or other that seems to be sufficient to subdue the lower ranks. Now, in my day, I keep saying that, in my day, if a constable had a case and a senior officer intervened, that senior officer ran a severe risk, and I saw it happen on 2 occasions, of being arrested himself and taken into the charge room, and the custody sergeant would back him up, back the PC up. Doesn't happen anymore, it would seem, although... I mean, we hear whisperings about discontent and unhappiness. It could suddenly burst through, and those who conceal things in the high ranks are undoubtedly worried, which is a good sign.
It is a good sign, and of course, anybody in the professional services who's coming forward to do the right thing or whistleblow needs the full support of the wider general public. So it takes a lot of courage for people to speak out. They have mortgages to pay, they have families to look after. When they step forward, we need to be supporting them. But let's just remind ourselves of how dirty things have got in Britain. So this was an old Mail article, MPs act on blue chip phone hacking, legal insurance firms behind 80% of snooping, according to a police report into Mr. Leveson. And this all went into the Leveson inquiry. Let's have a look at the honourable gentleman. You always trust a judge. We had a question for Mr. Leveson. It still stands. We would like to know how one of my personal emails to a sole third party ended up in the trial bundle for a case in Scotland involving former head of the Scottish Law, Eilish Angelini. Was my email hacked, and if so, by whom? Since I did not release the email, how did it end up in the trial bundle? Of course, that was never answered by the law firms concerned, and certainly we've had absolutely no interest from Leveson inquiry or indeed the British government. So hacking of emails is fine as long as the government's doing it, and it's being done to presumably cover up some form of crime. Well, you may be thinking that the NHS is a public body. We say it's not. UK Column's been warning for a considerable period of time that the NHS has simply been privatised by the back door, whilst David Cameron and the rest of the Conservative, Lib Dem and Labour team have lied. But we were fascinated by this tweet that was sent in to us. It says, it's by a gentleman called Andy Sant from Primary Healthcare. So here we are, Heathrow Airport Terminal 5, getting ready for round 2 of NHS Leadership Fast Track at Harvard University. So we're particularly interested by this little snippet. This follows along with the UK column article towards 1 million change agents, warning about the proliferation of the political charity common purpose in the management structure of the NHS. And here we have another little insight into the fact that patient care is rock bottom. That's not important. What is important to jet set the managers off to America for some form of political leadership reframing. Well, we've also been hearing about the military, and as we've just indicated, of course, we're seeing extraordinary events around defence as David Cameron perpetuates the lie there is no money. And we've been told by several authorities that essentially there's a campaign now to undermine British aerospace. Well, whether or not we like British aerospace, what we are interested in this report is what the truth is about what Cameron's government is doing. And it's been indicated to us that there is effectively a Conservative plot against British aerospace. Contracts have apparently been falling, and it's now known that in the Strategic Defence Review 2015, effectively fewer contracts are going to be awarded, less money, but fewer contracts to British aerospace, which is going to put the company under such pressure they are going to become increasingly vulnerable to a hostile takeover. We understand that the US defence, that should be firms, US defence firms are likely to be the overall winner. So the significance of this is essentially it would destroy the last ability of Britain to look after its own defence. And perhaps we shouldn't be surprised, because in comes the Telegraph with a massive article talking about breaking up the RAF and to stop buying British with equipment for the armed forces. The Defence Review is a chance to stop wasting money on tanks, frigates and pilots and break the dominance of BAE Systems. Now, we say what this is really about is breaking British aerospace. Here's part of the article. So that's it then. Britain just a third-class power, and yet our defence budget is the 5th biggest in the world. It's around the same as France, and France has proper aircraft carrier complete with planes. Agree with that. France also has hundreds of operational strike jets. It has maritime patrol planes. Its army may soon have twice as many soldiers as ours. Why don't we have all that? Well, here is the sting in the tail. According to this journalist, the answer is mostly the British defence industry dominated by BAE Systems. Our arms industry is lamentably inefficient. So there's no proper investigative journalism here. There's no look at the political decisions which have simply been destroying Britain's defence procurement system. There's no look at the fact we have what are clearly anti-British politicians. We see the Daily Telegraph joining on the bandwagon to essentially undermine British aerospace. Well, who's the author? Let's have a look at this man. He boasts he's ex-military, dressed up as some form of, I don't know, semi-paramilitary here, but he's come out of nowhere as a journalist, and apparently he's now being pushed as somebody who should be writing on defence. Well, we think this man is out to help destroy Britain's ability to defend itself, and we'd certainly like to take him on in discussion as to why he can't work out that it's Britain's politicians destroying the industry, and of course they'd like nothing better than us to have no manufacturing capability at all. We haven't had any prior discussion on this, John, but it's a pretty interesting state of affairs. We can watch our armed forces simply being cut to pieces in front of our eyes.
Ever since Mr. Cameron cut the wings off the Nimrods, which is one of his first official acts, there's been a question mark over his loyalty, hasn't there? And this is just further proof. Secret deals with the French. Army at the smallest stage it's been since Waterloo, and so on. It's treason. It really is as simple as that.
It's treason. allowing the country to, or forcing the country into a condition where the country can't defend itself. Of course, the other reason why everybody should be deeply concerned at these cuts is that it is our own armed forces that offer protection, not just for a military threat from overseas, but of course, if the government moves forward with what we believe are the plans to cause civil unrest in this country. So with no British armed forces, greater excuse or more excuse for David Cameron and his cohorts to say we need to bring in, for example, French police or European police to work on the streets of Britain. And we should remember that those personnel are not civilians, they are in fact military personnel and of course all armed. So those of you who are still a little squeamish about supporting Britain's military should actually be thinking these are the very people we will need to count on if David Cameron is allowed to get away with his treacherous plans for greater disturbance in UK.
Yes, as you've reported previously, the EU treaty purport to allow powers for European armed forces to be deployed in the UK. There is, in fact, a European gendarmerie force based in Italy, something like 4,000 men, but capable and reinforced dramatically in an emergency. And a gendarme is a soldier whose role is to police civilians, which is completely different to ours. For those that don't know, military policemen only have powers over soldiers, not civilians. Different beast altogether. I recall you saying that the number of ports in the country has been reduced to a dramatically low level, didn't you? Is it 4 or 6 ports that import food?
I'm going to say it's 4, but it could be 6. It's a while since I was handling that. But of course, what has happened is that the strategic infrastructure around ports has been sold off to foreign companies, and because of the rise in containerized products, it's only the container ports which really, the country increasingly relies on the container ports. So at each step, we see Britain still really as an island, albeit with a tunnel. We are being strangled slowly but surely, increasingly easy to see, as you say, John, what these politicians are doing. Well, as a last subject, let's just remind ourselves of the situation in Scotland. And David Scott in Northern Exposure has been warning about the Scottish model of government, which appears to be something of a mix between fascism and Marxism. Communitarianism is probably the correct term. So he's going to be reporting further on his findings about the subversion of Scottish politics. But it seems that this lady, businesswoman Michelle Monet, has hit the spot. She says, for the first time, I don't feel safe in Scotland, a country consumed by hatred and ill will. So this is yet another person speaking out on what appears to be a miraculously rapid change in atmosphere in Scotland ever since Alex Salmond started pushing for devolution. And of course, this is not Scots getting annoyed with the English. This is one Scotsman turning on another. We know that the political establishment like nothing better than the famous divide and rule policy. As we sit south of the border and watch Scotland, it appears to us that somebody is pulling the strings to cause trouble at every level. I'll give you last comment on that, John, before we close today's news.
Well, it's a conspiracy. It's the bottom line, isn't it? We can see it, and our job is to wake more people up.
Well, there you have it. Very simple. We need to wake people up, and the best way to do that is to get out talking, spreading the word by whatever means possible, from talking in the Tesco queue, if you must, to emailing, twittering, tweeting, and getting those letters out. When the bulk of the British public understand they're being attacked by their own government, we are well on the way to winning. So we'll leave you with that thought. No news from UK Column tomorrow, but we will be back with you on Friday at 1 o'clock, and we will bring that excellent interview with the South Wales politician. Thanks for joining us. Thank you, John. Bye-bye.
Okay.